This guy usually brings in a lot of smashes.
Smashed it with your iron rod.
He is the former federal prosecutor. Now he's on the defense side. There's a TV show you could do around him. He is a veteran and regular on television and radio, as you know, offering analysis. We're very lucky to have him stop through here on Thursdays. He's the great David Katz, everyone. The legal ninja, David Katz. Hi, David.
Hi, great to be with you.
Yeah. Boy, there's a lot going on. I wonder if I could start with something that's a little offbeat. I know we always talk about the Trump cases and E. Jean Carroll, and it would be terrific to touch on that here. But what I want to ask you about is this Ed Sheeran case. There's a case of, maybe you can sort of summarize it for us, but as I understand it, Ed Sheeran writes a song, it becomes a hit, and the family of Marvin Gaye, they say, hey, that is the same progression of chords or the same melodies or whatever, you can unpack this a little bit, as the Marvin Gaye song. And we think, and then you can tell me, are they suing for damages? Do they sue for copyright infringement? Or what do they sue for, and what is it really all about, please?
Well, it's great to be with you. If I could just mention a couple of things, Mark, right off the bat. I'm sorry to be coming in at this angle, sort of, but I hope. Can
you tilt it? You can tilt it down if you want. You just tilt the thing down a little bit. No, you can't.
I try, but I'm worried that it's going to cut off completely. So I figure.
Okay, all right, leave it where it is. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
But I have someone coming in to take a look at it before next week. So that's one thing. The other thing is that people have written in and asked who is the portrait behind me. And that's the U.S. District Judge that I clerk for in Washington, D.C. He went on to be the chief judge, and it's the chief judge in Washington, D.C. who looks at these special prosecutor cases. And so when you hear that someone's ruling on the attorney-client privilege in Washington, D.C., these internal decisions, the ones that you don't get to hear about, and then you suddenly see that someone has to go in front of the grand jury. Maybe it's Mark Meadows, maybe it's Giuliani, maybe it's the lawyer for Trump, the one that was the Mar-a-Lago lawyer. That's decided by the chief judge in Washington, D.C. in the federal court. And of course, I had the great privilege to be his law clerk. And so I love to have his picture up in the office. And so that's what that is. And some other people have written to me and just said so many nice things. So I just wanted to take a moment and thank them for the compliments, the questions. I don't really respond to them because I'm a working lawyer. But if you send them in during the show, of course, Mark and Kim will,
we'll post them on screen
and ask them. So let's turn to this case. These are very interesting cases. I followed the case of Led Zeppelin and Stairway to Heaven.
That seemed like David. I can't play this music because of copyright infringement. That it'll strike our episode. But that seemed like the Led Zeppelin case. Not to interrupt, and this is my last time I'll interrupt you. But that seemed like they really did take and lift almost directly the chord progression or the note progression. I'm sorry. So go ahead. That struck me as a really clear case.
No, Mark and Kim. The more that it's an interchange. As they say during oral argument in court, revel in the questions. So I revel in your questions, and I like the back and forth. It's actually better than when I'm doing it just the audio. It's hard to, I can't see you, so I can't do the back and forth. But so that's great. Anyway, this case case involves Stairway to Heaven, and Led Zeppelin had actually toured with the group called Spirit, who had a tune that was arguably similar to Stairway to Heaven. And they had expert witnesses to, explain the chord progressions, the notes, the melodies, the beat, those kinds of expert testimony about it. But a lot of times, Mark, it comes down to the jurors. It's a jury question. It's not decided by clear and convincing evidence, certainly not by proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's decided by more likely than not. And Led Zeppelin actually won. The jury actually found in favor of Led Zeppelin that it was more likely than not that they had not infringed the copyright. And you have to think, here's Led Zeppelin touring with a band that was playing what was, according to the experts, a similar tune. And you wonder, in a landmark case like that, if Led Zeppelin won a jury award, you wonder how anybody can win in a case like the estate of Marvin Gaye. Because Sheeran is going to take the stand. I think he already has, maybe. I think he will. I think he'll be likable. there he is, a human being who says, this came to me, maybe it sounded like the other song, but I did not copy this song. I didn't steal it. He'll say that under oath. I think he'll be likable. And again, if you can be found not liable when you've toured with a band that's playing, according to the experts, a very similar tune, I just don't think that if you're going to bet money, I would bet on, on Ed. And I would not bet on the estate. And a lot of times, we talked about this with Dominion and Fox News, that so many civil cases settle. These cases tend not to settle because it's a knock on the artist if he was a copier, if he stole somebody else's work. And since it gets spun that way, even if you only pay a reasonable, what's reasonable from a business point of view, there's some amount, obviously, that the estate would take. They feel they have a duty to protect this copyright and to look out for it. There's some amount that they would take, but I don't think there's an amount that the civil defendant would pay, because I think it's too much of a knock on him. So I expect this one to go to a jury trial, and I expect that probably the estate of Marvin Gaye will not prevail civilly.
Yeah, you just think that Ed Sheeran is too likable, well-known, and kind of the same way the Zeppelin people. And to me, the Zeppelin thing was straightforward. That was lifted. It was the same song, the same beginnings, absolutely identical. And the fact, as you've suggested, that Zeppelin prevailed in that, I love that you use that as sort of the test case, or I don't know what you'd call it, the historical case that might inform what's going to happen here, because to me that was clearly a lift. And as you say, they toured with the band. I mean, my God, you don't even have the high ground of, well, I never heard that before. You didn't hear it before? We played it every night, and you were right off stage.
Well, I think that's an excellent point, and there are not that many precedents. There aren't that many cases. And that one, which was tried in federal court, I remember when it was going on, and I was trying to poke my head in there one day. And, the big stars of Led Zeppelin are actually in the courtroom, just like he's going to be in the courtroom. I don't remember whether they testified or not. I really believe, is going to testify, Ed. And I just think that, like I said, it's a civil jury. It's by a preponderance of the evidence. So you can see why the estate would bring it. It is a lot of money if they win. You asked what would the remedy be. You basically get paid as the artist. You get the artist royalties if it's based on art. So if you go and you do a cover of some song and it becomes a hit, a big hit. One thing I have to say is I followed a band way back in the 60s called the Bar-Kays, and they had Otis Redding with them. And, Otis Redding did Respect, and it made very little money. It was on the soul charts. And then Aretha Franklin did Respect, and the rest is history. But if you wrote Respect, you got the royalties from, all the sales that Aretha Franklin made. And so if they won and they win the award, then I think they'd be entitled to the writer's royalties for having written, basically, because the jury would have found that was the song, that it was just copied and altered a little bit, but it was their song, just altered and modified a little bit. So we'll see what happens with that case. But I think it's a real interesting one. They don't come up that often.
Yeah, this is interesting. The ones that I think of, Pharrell, wasn't Marvin Gaye, and it was Robin Thicke and Pharrell did that song, Blurred Lines, and the Marvin Gaye estate sued on that, and they won. They won $5 million. So I'm not sure that.
Why are you yelling?
The Marvin Gaye people don't know exactly how to pursue this. It seems like let's get that legal band back together and get the same jury verdict. I was going to ask you though, and of course there are other examples of Huey Lewis with "I Want a New Drug" and Ray Parker Jr. And through time this has happened, but you're right, they don't crop up all the time, which is amazing since so many chord progressions are so similar. Sometimes it's kind of wild. How do they decide on the amount of money they want?
Well, first of all, there's a great British expression which goes, when there's a hit, there's a writ. So apparently these are more common, I guess, in Great Britain. And of course, that's the idea. If it's not a hit, nobody's interested. But if it's a mega hit, then of course people get interested. And I think, this I'm not an expert on, but I think basically the sales.
I see.
And someone just wrote in. I saw it. I try not to glance down to keep my eyes forward. But someone wrote in about George Harrison and "He's So Fine" and "My Sweet Lord." And
Right.
whether I'm right or I'm wrong, I have the perception as a huge Beatles fan that, oh, what a pity that such a beautiful song was, kind of copied from someone else. So it does diminish. This is what I'm talking about. It does diminish the reputation of an artist. If people thought that Stairway to Heaven was written by somebody else, it would diminish the appreciation of Led Zeppelin. Like I think it does somewhat. I don't know. I wouldn't want to take a survey, but I think it diminishes the view of George Harrison a little bit. That My Sweet Lord, I mean, this classic was supposed to be He's So Fine. And let me just say this: don't put me on a jury because I don't really hear it. I'm one of those jurors that would go back there, and at least when I hear the two of them, I don't hear it. Now, the experts may say it's the exact same song, the notes, the progressions, the melodies. There is expert testimony on this. People say music is kind of mathematical, which if you're just a normal listener like me, but they say there really is, of course, a science to this, and there is expert testimony that's usual in these cases.
Yeah, I mean, once it was really hammered in, I saw that or heard that My Sweet Lord and He's So Fine. I love My Sweet Lord. I think it's a great song. He's So Fine is a little too, like, before my time. It's not the kind of music that I like so much. But I heard the little chord progression. I don't know, man. It's hard to think that, again, as you say, on a jury, you don't know. I mean, like, even when I'm thinking, it's like, I don't know. And then you're influenced in that jury room by the fact that, 8 other people go, come on, man, you can't hear that. You know what I mean? At some point, it's weird how that jury cross current works in that room. A lot of stuff goes down. And if you're sort of on the fence about it, you just kind of go with the crowd.
Well, and again, a lot of times it's 6. And, you have to be superhuman if, Robert Plant is sitting there making this wonderful impression on you. I mean, these guys are charming. They didn't get there by not being charming. Or, Ed Sheeran's going to be sitting in the courtroom and also testifying. So that's why I say I would bet on Ed. Bet on Ed on this one. We're going to have a chance to get to...
Ed Sheeran, you think will prevail? You want to get to E Jean Carroll? Yeah, please. So the E Jean Carroll case in New York against Donald Trump is about a rape that took place in a department store, but the charge, I was saying this the other day, curiously, is not so much about this violent act as it is about things that happened after the violent act, right?
Well, it's a fascinating case. I mean, it really is. And I think it's it's difficult for people to kind of understand. So just give me a minute on this. What happens is that back in, I guess, the 90s, the case is, more than 25 years old. And it's a Thursday. She can't be exactly sure which Thursday, but she knows it was in April. So that's one of 4 days, right? And, I think there was nothing people say, oh, well, that's it. She can't even say what day it was. This must be, what Trump always says, a hoax, a con job made up. But she didn't report it right away. And when you look at why she didn't report it and what happened, it actually cuts very much her way. I think that this suit is going to go her way. I think the jury in this case is going to find against Trump. But the story of what happens, this Bergdorf Goodman's is a place that when we're in New York, my wife loves to go in there. It has the famous shop windows. It is, many people think, the most elegant store. And some people go in there just to look at it. So yes,
I don't allow my other half in the store with any credit cards.
Exactly, because the prices are astronomical. So a lot of people go just for the experience of being in such an exclusive store. And it does have some men's goods. So the story is that she may have not bought anything that day. That's why she doesn't have a receipt. She might have been one of those people who just looked around the lobby and said, oh, my God, look at some of this stuff in here. You have 10 minutes to kill. As she's coming out of a revolving door, Trump is coming in. They start chatting. They've met at a party. He says to her, I'm shopping for a girl. Can you help me? This will be fun. Carol is an advice columnist, so she's looking for celebrity sightings and interesting things she can mention in her work as an advice columnist. Before you know it, they're walking around and they have this conversation. Oh, I need to buy some lingerie. We're near the lingerie store. They have this joke where it's not much of a joke. He says, why don't you try on some lingerie, which sounds to me like it's real. She jokes back, why don't you try it on? And they end up actually in a dressing room with a piece of lingerie, a bodysuit. Now, she feels obviously very regretful that she was bantering with him, that she got herself in this situation. But it makes sense to me, and I think it will to the jurors, that all that she thinks is going to happen is some more playfulness like this. The minute the door to the dressing room, and it's not one of those like you see, it actually has a door that closes. So now you're in a room with a door closed behind you. The minute he gets in there with her, he just mashes her against the wall. And according to her version of it, this all happens very fast. And she manages to extricate herself after allegedly he's done that. She runs out and she calls two friends the next day. One of her says, "Oh my God, you've been raped, report it." Her other friend says to her, "You'd be making a huge mistake to report it. This guy has a huge number of lawyers. He'll bury you. He'll make you look like soiled goods. One way or the other, he'll destroy your career." So she decides not to report it. 20 years go by. He's the president. She decides that she's going to report it. She's going to move forward. And her hook is that when she makes her claim, he holds a press conference as president, you might recall, and he says, number one, she's not my type, which my lawyers say I'm not supposed to say. And number two, I didn't do it, and she's a liar. It turns out a president or a top candidate can say something like, she's a liar, I didn't do it, because it's one of the things that they're allowed to do, and they're defended by. They're allowed to make comments like that. And there's a body of law. Ted Kennedy won on a case like that. And so Trump, to the amazement of all of us, I was on with Pat Thurston, whose head was exploding when I was explaining there really is such a doctrine that the feds went to the defense. The Department of Justice, I think it was under Barr then, went to the defense of Trump. They managed to move this case to federal court because it involved a federal official, and then it kicked around the appeals courts for a long, long time. So this thing is from the 1990s. Her original filing of her complaint was like 2017, something like that. Then it went all through the federal courts. Now, you might ask me, how on earth is it in federal court now? And the reason is simply what we call diversity of citizenship. He's now a resident of Florida. She's a resident of New York. When somebody sues on a state claim in that situation, the case can be removed to federal court because there's different citizenship. The old idea was that you couldn't get a fair trial. You know, if you were from, New York City and they hailed you to court in Georgia, they'd screw you because you were the New Yorker, and vice versa. So you got to go to federal court with life tenured judges. And the other weird wrinkle on it is that they had these lookbacks for the statute of limitations. So in the lookbacks, they allowed people whose claims were 20, 25 years old to bring them during a 1-year look-back period when they became green again. They became live and not barred by the statute of limitations. So she sued him for the sexual assault as a sexual victim, but it's civil. And she sued him in addition to that for the defamation by saying, he's not my type, she's lying, I didn't do this. She says, that's a lie. You did do this. And I'm going to show that you defamed me by saying I'm a liar. And her proof that he defamed her is to prove the validity of her claim that he raped her in the dressing room.
What are the realities concerning the length of time that's passed? Does that affect potential outcomes, David, or does this happen? People bring things many years later on, a serious situation like this one.
Well, if the statute of limitations applies, when I went to law school, you'd pretty much learn that it was like murder, and everything else had a statute of limitations that were 5 or 10 years. But a statute of limitations is an agreement by the people what kind of statutes they want to have. And it's been agreed by a lot of people, and hence by the legislatures, to extend the statute of limitations. So New York, California, many states have either extended the statute of limitations, so it goes back a long time. We also have the situation where if you are a minor, you're allowed to bring it after you're in your majority, and then a lot of people give you more years, even after your majority, to go back and bring a claim for something that happened when you were a minor. That was the lawsuit against Bill Cosby. And people
Sure.
said, my God, that assault, alleged assault at the Playboy Mansion sure happened a long time ago, but that was one of those extensions of the statute of limitations. It can be quite technical. If Trump is found liable, as I believe he will be in this case, then he'll start the appeal process going. And, I don't think that he's going to end up testifying in the case, but he's put out some, disparaging remarks, and the judge admonished the lawyer to go admonish Trump to stop, arguing the case on Truth Social, because there are some things that are excluded from evidence, and yet Trump, in classic fashion, has put them out in as wide an ambit as he can in the hope that people will hear it. And the judge is very worried in the hope that the jurors will hear it. It's an anonymous jury, by the way. After the threats to the DA in New York about a month ago, the federal judge decided that there would be total anonymity and secrecy for the jurors and for their identities in this E Jean Carroll versus Donald Trump civil case.
So essentially, you're saying that Trump is trying to pollute the atmosphere around the trial. He's trying to get this out, even though he's been admonished not to?
That's what the judge said. And I think that the two reasons why Trump is going to tone it down right now is because he's worried about a federal obstruction of justice trial. It is a federal crime to obstruct a civil proceeding in certain ways that are prohibited. And this federal judge has really made it clear you should stop doing this. And I just don't see Trump testifying. You know, it was like with a special prosecutor. He always wanted to testify, but guess what? He never really wanted to testify because you get cross-examination. The questions come flying at you. You got to answer them. Trump's already made a huge mistake. He says the woman's not his type. Every time he gets a chance, he says the woman's not his type. And then she's not only beautiful now, but you see a picture of her then, and she was stunning. When he sees a picture of her and they say, you ever met this woman? He said, that's Marla, isn't it? So he thought in the deposition, she looked enough like a woman that he's widely believed that he married for her beauty. So he thought she was as beautiful as the woman he married for her beauty. What, she's not his type? She looked in the photo like she was exactly his type at the time that this thing happened. So he's not, he's a terrible witness. You know, the way that he bombasts and brags and everything, he's just a terrible witness. And I think people get to him and they say to him, look, unless you want to really slit your throat, stay off the witness stand. So that's what I expect. And like I said, I expect they're going to fine for her, and I think they're going to give her a big award of money. One last thing, one of the reasons that these people live in Florida is they play these rules so that, you know, OJ moved to Florida. OJ never paid his award. You know, try to get the award out of him. But I think she will win a large amount. I think it'll be appealed forever. And I think after the appeals, she will still have her judgment for a large amount. And maybe after this is all over, Trump's estate will pay her something, because she's given really compelling testimony that this had a huge deleterious impact on her life.
Yeah, no, apparently. Deleterious is a ding word, yeah. I'll tell you something, David Katz, always interesting. And in this case, both situations that you discussed today, legal situations, the Ed Sheeran situation and also the one with E Jean Carroll, you have made predictions. And tell everyone about your last prediction.
Oh, my last prediction was that the Dominion versus Fox News case would settle, and that even if it started, it would settle. And I also predicted that the Supreme Court would rule just as it did in the case. I can never say the name.
That's the big one, the methylpestrone or whatever.
No. Yes.
I
said that.
Correctly predicted that.
I said it got extended for 2 days because Alito didn't have the votes, and boy, did he not have the votes. He only had Thomas. It went 7-2, and I think that's a good that's a good indication that Barrett is not going to be too radical. Gorsuch is still out, and Gorsuch now has his own ethical problem. But let's talk about that next time, okay?
Nostrakatzis with his predictions of perfectly on target. Thank you, David Katz. Appreciate you being here, my friend.
You. Hi, Kim.
All right, Kim, say goodbye to David Katz. Come on, say hello and goodbye to the company.
Goodbye, David Katz.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.